The FBI quickly responded
It's funny
to the
too,
alarm.
because it's like how dangerous some of this shit is.
6 Adam 31.
I don't even know why they would play so
These
much
men were
psychic.
clearly not afraid to use
Given what I
deadly
know, and
force.
given what I teach them, and given what they try to act arrogant about, it's just like, there's no way there's
Courier
anything
would
left
later
over
die
of
from
you.
his injury.
You're just a bullshitter. And then by the end of it, it's like, you don't feel that, then it's like, why follow me
As he
so
described the
hard?
gunmen, it quickly became obvious they were
And
probably
then
the
there's
same
your
men
pulse, your
responsible
heart
for
rate,
the
your
previous
breathing.
robbery at the Steak and Ale
And even when I'm
restaurant.
sitting here and I'm hitting different pressure points
There was
no
money
one
taken
knows
in
about.
that particular robbery,
And then
but there
even
were a
empty
number of
pressure points
shots,
where I just
fired.
like want to null
So
something.
the ante was still
It's still
going
kind
up
of
here as far
like,
as I
don't
was
you
concerned
realize even if you
because
couldn't
of,
feel it, it's even
the
worse?
continued use of violence
Like, what the
by
fuck?
these two individuals.
And then by the end of it, it's just like,
Ballistics evidence would further confirm
I
the
suddenly
connection
just
between
kind
the
of
two
like
robberies.
cave in, and I'm like, oh, you mean act like you're drunk? I'm like,
Investigators
yes,
found
oh,
double
wait, let me
buckshot
give
from
you a
a
little
12-gauge shotgun,
massage.
45
And
caliber
then
bullet
it's just
casings,
like,
and two 23 shell
here, let
casings.
me tell you a real
The
story why I was
223s
threatening arms
seemed
and
most
legs.
significant.
If you have a 3D
And the
reality
identification,
connection to
of
reality in
division
the
of
world,
firearms,
or a real
unit of
connection
the
to the
FBI
world,
laboratory compared
use your
those two
hands
shell casings
and your
said they
mind
were
to work.
fired from the
That is a
same
part of your
weapon.
perception, that is
So
a
we
part of your
definitely
work,
have a
your
link now
intellect,
between
and
the
your
Winn-Dixie
basic
attempt
instinct.
and the
That's what
Steak
has to
and Ale
do with your symmetry, your
Two
logistic
violent robberies
balance,
were linked to the same
the way you
bastard gunman,
process things.
but there were no
That
leads
has to
their
do
identities.
with adding up your
Because
also
they had
your
not scored any
consciousness.
cash at the
So the more I
Winn-Dixie
juggle that
and so little at
around,
the Steak
even
and
in
Ale,
a physical
investigators were
synapses,
certain they would
I
soon
break
strike
the
again.
barrier between you and reality and disconnect you from
2
me
weeks later,
or
Friday,
reality.
November 8th,
If you hold on me as much as reality, then you had another
time
thing
a
coming
bank
about a
job
weird
at
ass
the
duel.
Florida National Bank.
But by the end of it, you just, for how dangerous life itself can
As a
be,
teller and a guard
I don't
walked from the
understand
main
why
building
anyone
to
would
the
play
drive-thru.
this way.
Two
Or
masked
why wouldn't I give them a real critical lesson, like the most definitive skyscraping lessons you could ever learn? Stuff that's so important that, like, if you learn it, you suddenly realize why life is so fragile, and no matter how rich you are, it doesn't matter because you piss poor, because in 2 seconds someone could just kind of touch a little nerve under your rib
She
cage
tried to comply,
and let
but
you
there was
go
no
in like
option.
6 seconds. And that's your ass. And I'm not talking about just death, I'm just talking about like a form of paralysis that'll disable you to a point where someone has never felt such fright and suffering from what seems so insignificant as you unnoticeably die. And as you die, all I have to do is release the restraint or let your adrenaline flush in and let you recourse back to normal. And then even when I'm sitting there and I'm like, there's no way in hell you could possibly be arrogant after something like that. It's such a humbling experience, even when I do the thing to myself. And I still have to realize you're that arrogant or you need to win that badly. And then even when I recess the point into a logistic where I let them go into some place in fate where it feels like a win, but the loss is that when you arrive to the conclusion of where I couldn't make anything better, if you do find a way through and make things better for us, it's a good thing. It's an accomplishment. It's called progress. Or you'll realize why no matter how perfectly balanced you are, how strong you become, all the techniques that you master, eventually you are like a fucking Roman statue. You are doomed to lose your arms and legs at some point. At some point, you will lose your arms and legs. So you don't. This also goes into a theory, which isn't that much of a theory, that eventually mankind will evolve out of their body and into machines, which I still don't see clinically as something that would be possible or something that you would want. But put it this way, if it's possible, it's something that you want. It's something that you don't want. And even if it's something that you want, be careful with it because that's a lot of work. To move like your fucking arm is one thing, but imagine having to build like a factory so that you can move your elbow. It's just ridiculous and you would never fucking want it. Unless you think that your achievement of mankind is so above and beyond standard that to solidify your advancement, you would do something like that. And even beyond that, it still would be like, robots have a bit of a heat issue and certain other things. why attaining artificial intelligence, which is still going to be artificial intelligence because no one knows really what they're going to do with the machine body. Also, when it comes down to something like Terminator, no one really knows what they're going to do with the machine body. So it still gets back to the fact that, like, even when you know that you could generate steam, water, air, 9 different elements, 24 elements and all these different things, which goes into, like, if you can affect reality and it's something that you can create from your fathom and it's not one of the normal elements or a correlation of some other elements or 2 elements put together, that's still a whole new variable element because that element has having effect on the variable in life that creates your scenario for whatever your problem is or whatever you're getting around or for whatever you're essentially cheating, because it's not necessary to have a lot of things, even though there's really technically 12 elements, I guess, but that would still be only cohesive to understanding what reality is worth. Now, making steam in a non-conductive temporary moment to hack a computer or to do something like that, all of these things are possible, but I don't consider it the same thing because this is just like, a portion of steam built up there and fucked up the computer or provided a misaligned connectivity to put the other processor chip to the other processor chip to skip and bypass a part of the computer to make it run without that bullshit. Like simply soldering a new chip in. So instead of that, you wouldn't have to solder the chip in. And there's a lot of things in Illusions of Reality revealed that I'm revealing only for the fact that, like, as a piss poor boy, there was different times when a lot of people helped me and I didn't know what the fuck it was. And it's just like, oh, you put your computer on top of mine and then just help me do stuff. But, the viability to my intellect was probably what it was. But being destitute of certain things does provide you a lot of intuitive thought on a raw build, on building up life from nothing. So you get a lot of, like, weird things that you build up, like why an auto car's combustion works or automobile works, or what's the difference between a car and an automobile and a mechanism, a gizmo, and a device. All of these things, all ensuring different parts of life, but there's usually 1 or 2 components or key logics missing it within it or with it to change into something else. I just feel like sometimes I'm making the Marlon Brando tapes of the other side, but at least Marlon Brando did us a huge favor that no one noticed. It was just kind of like one of those things where, like, life forces you to filter yourself and then you say a bunch of things that will allude to what the household is, or like the stalwart household, or any of those type of things. Like, what was the true meaning of any of these things? So, or like, what is the house model? What do they really understand? Because it's like the downfall of Usher. Yes, we understood why it was sad and why they fell down. When you get through what those houses were worth, why it was sad, all these extra issues, it doesn't really matter because it's like what those houses represent was a distraction from what you shouldn't have known or didn't want to know, or like, like, why would you hate the Illuminati? You were jealous, bitch. It still goes back to you were jealous, bitch. Of their secrets, their power, how they see reality, how they judge things. Mostly you're jealous, bitch. Or whatever, when it comes to Masons, you're a jealous bitch. Or you wanted to ask for procreation rights and we didn't know you, and they didn't know you, and, light is more giving in that manner, and they still didn't know you, so I thought you were disgusting. And either way, we're not in that much of a disagreement. It's just like a certain amount of rules for everyone, and so on and so forth. And they seem to present as much law as lawlessness as possible. It's just kind of like, well, I don't even know how the hell you would care or why. And it was like, so controlling. But light is like anything else in math and reality. It has a lot of rules to adhere. And then even when you look at earthly stuff, it's still kind of like, oh yeah, you mean lawlessness too. But whatever. It still has a lot of rules that you have to abide by, and even more so considering that, let's say the other element, black, is completely unbridled. So even the rules with that would be like, eventually what does have meaning is that there is meaning at all, or that there is a structural integrity at all. So you can't play chess without knowing that there are puzzle pieces and that there is like a frame to the board. So even if you were a hideous, evil shadow monster, doppelganger or something, you would still have an interpretation that this person or that or whatever I'll never be, or that the structure of the game involves what you're trying to be better at or proficient at to create the desired conclusion. So anyways, back to the point. At some point with the divinity and the reality of attaining evolution to the next parallel, at most points you lose your arms and leg. It's like being put in a centrifuge. It's just like, of course, eventually the astronaut passes the fuck out. It's just what happens is what happens. Or worse yet, if you can stand not passing out from any of this, it gets to a certain level where, like, okay, the arms are going numb, the legs are going numb, some other key areas are unfunctioning, there's clotting, different stuff, maybe even the bends from just reality's pressure or something like that, even though I know that that's not the bends. Might as well be, though, but, whatever, even from nutritional loads, but, whatever. Especially cutting their diet with like so many different physical realities that who the fuck knows sometimes. But fortunately, y'all like salad, so whatever. Because see, if I was the guy at the corner of each earth, like hanging up trees and putting all this different stuff around to shadow around the microcosm of what a sphere is, which, the earth is not a perfect sphere, so just don't think too deeply into it. It's just a hint that eventually, geometrically, to take the share or turn into what I have, I would be obligated to understand only a little bit. Even from incandescent adolescent growth. So, yeah, that would be if the plant was aware of that, which in most cases, not exactly. Too busy enjoying itself in some way to have known to give a shit. In some ways, you were either busy, precluded that, or already understood that. So that's how you knew, or you just really enjoy plants to the point where you asked yourself if you're happy with the world, and somehow your epiphany became a total understanding or something. So anyway, back to the point. At some point with most things naturally or in occurring, you start to get threats to your arms and your legs. So I put it there. So no matter what, you beat me, I don't know, whatever, your back hurts, who gives a shit? But eventually, if you catch up to anything that means anything, your desired question into reality would be, how hard do you have to be? How hard do you have to think? How strong do you have to fight? How many points do you have to your connection to reality in order to continue to progress, to evolve? That would be without threatening of your arms and legs and going numb, or your neural synapses is becoming unrefined, weak, or diluted into something else. And this is not just water. This is also just because of a lot of other things that you might be pushing on in the fabric of space and time while you're doing a bunch of different things or whatever. Now, the fact that there's, how do I explain it? ADD or whatever, I agree with that one because, seeing multiple or doing multiple things at once increases your perception on reality, and I would call that a better grip, really. In a lot of ways, they say it doesn't help them focus and do these other things. That can be true because, as you know, life wants to go do something else, or it just seems to give you more traction if you're about something. So you have to go find something to be about or not bore your mind so goddamn much. which that includes schoolwork being unchallenging or unremarkable towards any destination. Seems aimless and like you're just learning bullshit and crap. So your mind gives up on a psychological revolution or a evolution, which is just fucking sad and pitiful. But by the end of that, it just seems sad to know that people like put you through all that bullshit, and even as you slowly explain it, I'm not talking about here, I'm talking about within them being restrained and explaining something like this about why you shouldn't attack me, why you shouldn't attack other people, and why it could have been just as easy to drain you and to feed progeny, young siblings, or self. Even pure mortal essence or energy or the contract of your soul not being abiding to any of our, well, concerns. Fortunately for you, none of us gave a shit except for we were all noodling each other and like each other and know that it's already the end of the world, so all we have is that we should always be prepared to take care of each other like it's the end of the world. So spiritually speaking, no, I don't care. I pin you to other things because I don't owe you. We're not talking about human beings. We're talking about logistics, like when you can understand the size of this monolith, you're free from it, which is still a trick question because for what you know about monoliths, they always seem to be big. They're never really all that bigger than what you would now know as a holocrox or some shit, because a holocrox is shit. But otherwise, it's like whatever you were dumb enough to put into that thing for survival or whatever you knew to do with it still became a divine intuition for you to build on what you think is life. So as you were working, you filed yourself away, or your interpretation became so big that your link to reality became so engrossing to what your perception, your right to gain, or evolution, that it succumbed to the fervor of reality to want to discover those things or grow with you, or that life wasn't worth that perilous journey, and it became a slab of fake paperwork for whatever that fathom or epiphany was. And then that's pretty much all. And in most due propers, if abided by and passed by in most respectives, you might not have to lose your arms and legs, which is nice. But it's just kind of one of those things. And you'll know because it's more like, put it this way. If you ever want to find out the good, normal human being way, go become an alcoholic. Because all the spiritual bounds and hang-ups and things that you're really arguing with, that they try to train you to be human about and deal with, most of those things were written over by the correlation between reality, chemistry, and the atrophy of understanding something so indefinitively that you are gone and removed from reality. And I mean that in a way that, like, it is just so shit-ass lame that you finally discover something like infinite life and infinite death coexisting, and then realizing it was never worth a damn to have either one other than your own spiritual growth. That's why some people don't even care about human bodies, which is just unfortunate. But it's unfortunate because how do we get bothered? Some of these people are out of their goddamn mind. Flashback, bing, 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 hypknox telling you something. Some of these people are out of their fucking minds. So anyway, we went back to the fact that the exploration and the spiritual growth and what they were building was so natural that they probably escaped their mind in a more natural way and are not always out of their mind. But in any ways, sound and some of the other things like tapping on walls or registering their perception to a point in reality helps a lot. Now, not all of them just get fucking lost and go through all this bullshit and, like, you know, whatever, because you'd have to be pretty strong spiritually to get lost that way and have to be not making it up, at least a portion of it, in order to return back to stability or normal. And why would you have to confer with that person or me or anyone else? So anyway, let's just say that the one instance I had was that someone was kind of going blind, and I kind of understood how you could get spiritually lost. But anyway, it's not as difficult as like getting them back to their reality or whatever it's supposed to be. So anyways, I don't even do those as a villain. I don't do it as an arrogant person or a show off, even though sometimes I should, and I will sometimes from occasion, because it's just kind of like, you put me through this shit so many times that even my explanation that is my own, it still gets up to a root and a level. So anyway, back to the point. I think I made most of my points. But the reason I'm not arrogant about it is it seems so disgusting to have on tap something that can make everyone feel so empty as to end life and death, between the fact that, like, you eventually would have succumbed to death anyway, so the win is arbitrary for the fact that what you're looking for seems so stupid anyway. But when it came to the truth of the matter, revealing that also gives way to a worse thing. Like, even if we were able to accomplish a new century fucking evolution, or what was supposed to be eventually attained and provided by each other's growth, all of that is delusion and means nothing to the fact that eventually we would have succumbed to our own divine wisdom. No, can't be, saying ain't so. So even beyond the point where, like, the physical prowess and reality giving way to intelligence being worth nothing, because you'd probably want to be in good shape to use any of this stuff. So your connection with life and reality being all the more better to help you with these intellectual goals or these evolutions, or why it had nothing really to do with evolution. Evolution was used for a replacement word for revolution at times, even for intellectual sakes and purposes. That means that's useless, because if you weren't an intellect, you couldn't just like go and like create the new future evolution or the new process for all of us, because it would still require you to have a physical prowess over things. That's so sad. That's so shitty. So then it gets back to all the money that you earned and everything else that you do all means nothing, because it's like you could just die from trying to be more than what you're supposed to be for what is supposed to be intuitively infinite for all of us to gain. The real mortality we're looking for is intellectually divine. And then by the end of it, requires some of your body to be up to keep, or for the physical body to mean nothing at all, which is just trash. And eventually those things mean something. So it's like, what the fuck? Like, you know, arms and legs, whatever. And that's just like all the pressure points I know that are correlative to, you know, being better than everybody else and seeing everything and being quiet. It still doesn't mean shit, because all it equated for me was suffering on what I do know will never really give me anything or anyone else anything, or even like help out the real true evolution or revolution for all of us intellectually. So by the end of it, even when someone is like, you know, being arrogant about life and death, or like, you know, I stop and I mind my own business and the person is still kind of shallowly watching me, it's like saying like, oh, I could take him out because he's minding his own business. You mean you could sucker punch me? Of course you could sucker punch me. But my problem is I'm like, oh my God, you still get high off of that? How could you get high off of all of that when, like, literally you could break your pinky and, like, you could overwork your pinky and succumb to that shit. So I don't understand, like, why somebody would be willing to work so hard or, like, to wish so stupidly in order to get me to have a reasoning of weakness or them when I don't choose to. I know there's a lot of things to be weak about because it's my responsibility and the formidability of reality and your judgment and your jurisdiction and your adjudication to understand why being a prude is a very vapid, empty fucking thing, and the only thing we delve on is that maybe it's just bad luck and I don't know you. Or maybe I didn't owe the person. So even when you hit the wall and the best logic persistent to go back 2 steps because you weren't a loser, you were accomplishing something right, but somebody else's setback set us all back to the greater, weaker moment was to not try so hard to accomplish something so stupid. And if I really do believe in these things and the other things in life that make me a sub or make me inconsequential to what I have to offer people with greater meaning, is that the self-resistance, devotion, and the discipline coincide with the accomplishment may not gratify me or them that much to give us the aptitude or the acumen to accomplish all those things. And if that's the fucking case, why would this person waste their time trying to duel me? And it's like, if you're dueling me for that, why don't you just calm the fuck down, have a seat, and I won't talk to you. And then I won't have an effect on you, because I wasn't talking before that anyway. So it's just kind of like, whatever, forget what you heard. But, like, it still gets back to, like, of course stand up for yourself. Of course have a backbone. Of course I don't play these manipulative games with people when I just don't feel like fighting with them or fighting them off for someone else. Or maybe there's not enough calories in your body and we're just holding you up. Or, like, why are you, like, sleeping on the person? Or, like, how many calories do you have left over for this? Like, the other form of energy that we don't live off of isn't, like, a byproduct of how you argue with each other in that line that you're on your way to something for. It's just so bizarre to see how many different things give way to, like, you're a vampire, and, like, why I don't say anything is because the parts that I'm a vampire about, I'm not a smartass about. I try to generate some battery before I just, fast and starve myself to death and then fall asleep on people or something. So I don't know, whatever. And then you know how empty the fucking modeling world is. And by the end of it, it's just kind of like I ate a peach and that's good enough for all 3 or 4 of us. And then, once I'm out of that room, I'm into the next room where I can have a hamburger, or like why it's bad or not at all to have a hamburger. And then you still sit there and you think like, oh no, it doesn't mean shit. And it's like, I'll quit hamburgers one day and I'll go back to being vegan one day again, sooner or later. But it's one of them things where, like, if you think that it's a mystery, what if I told you that even when we have to get a little bit religious for you to conceivably understand this, and I shouldn't even point fingers at anything, so I'll just say animals, but most of the popular animals within the other side of fiction and the other side of fact all co-align to the fact that the story is given away to something that is so jello-y. So, the other word that I was going to say is related to metal, so it doesn't make any sense for that to be moldy or whatever. But anyways, let's get back to the fucking point. All of those things in reality look like a piece of jello, and you would have to damn near be manipulative to understand, pass on that kind of wisdom, or interpret it the exact correct way. Now, even when you look at all these things and what I do understand about it and what I do know I had to put together from, there's pieces of this car crash missing, so we fabricated some few exact scientific pieces to reveal what the car looked like after the car's accident. So all of those original pieces aren't real pieces. Yes. So why would you throw a Bible away? No, don't throw the Bible away. That's not the original word of God. It's that type of thing. Now, it's not that type of way, and I'm not saying anything about that. I just want you to go back to religion, not back to the auto bitel malistia. You know what I mean? Right. But anyways, like, I just want you to go back to a Bible. Now, don't throw the Bible away, because all the other things that correlate and add up to why their psychological warfare is somewhat with humans, somewhat with animal, somewhat with life itself, somewhat with nothing, and somewhat with all other elemental issues, it still boils down to the fact that if you have any clarity at all from any of these points, there are different people that have different understandings of clarity, and when you add all of it up and it's not a piece of jello, you start to realize, oh my God, this vegan shit might be a answer. A very big, critical 75% answer. Now, no one really understands why I've been smoking for like 4.5 days. Weed, menthol, all kinds of shit, and alcohol. So, and I haven't eaten in those like 3 or 4 days. So that's why my voice sounds extra worse, and my stamina and fatigue are extra worse. But anyways, back to the fucking point. All of those psychologicals added up together, and you start to realize, even when none of them are active, and you can count your demons like sheep in your sleep when you're not counting your money to keep, it's still weird to go back and start to realize okay, so it wasn't the money, it wasn't the animals, it wasn't a human psychological, and well, maybe it was the animals, but it wasn't a human psychological, it wasn't spirit logical, it wasn't creatures, it wasn't gods, and then I started adding up how it just seems like it's fucking human. And then it's star-cravingly, madly designed in a way that I was like, wait, if that was a human being, why did it scare me so much? Because, like, you know, even with something like psychological or psychopathic red, it's like, oh my God, you have like a really sick issue. You have a really sick issue about, you know, the big M word. Now, I'm not going to drop that because you'll probably figure out what that is and, like, you know, whatever. But, like, in the end, that's a very big deal. And that's why you can't do little weird things like hint to cannibals or cannabis and smoke the real meaning to any of that and hide behind the shroud and enjoy life. It just doesn't work that way. Those are people I watch my back for. Not because of anything really that bad or that wrong or that they're pushy or chasey or anything. They're not like that in most cases. They usually have a reason why, or it's just like that part of the season. Bad luck for you, bad luck for them. I don't know why brunettes are dark-haired. I don't know why. But then by the end of it, I still like watch my back a little bit because, oh, we bought her some pepper spray. But anyways, it gets back to the point where I've seen a lot of shit. I've heard a lot of like stuff. And I've processed a lot of these psychological dementias to a certain point where it's beyond human sanity and reality's opinion of us really glim and disgusting. Isn't how I escape reality or anything, but let's get back to the point. Reality's conception of us at times is so alienly intellectual and so ominously true that the perception of what they're talking about is so far from us that I would notice how I would never notice. But what hurts so much is that when you realize even when they're nowhere near us and they still have the capacity to let humanity go into places where it's like they don't mind doing certain things to use the big M word and have a statistic that way. They don't care about life and death that way. I guess it's a human thing. That's also probably due to the fact of what life does, what human being does, and what all these things end up doing with their vengeance and what has pissed them off, or what is deemed as right and wrong, which is beyond. In right and wrong, there is a beyond where everyone else who intellectually gets life doesn't get life and death because they're just kind of like, you'd have to be upset with something that you understand as free or free will in most weird sakes. And you would be mad at that because you understand what luck is and what life is, so you have a control over luck. So it's no longer luck, it's some sort of, well, I guess I shouldn't use that word, but because it sounds too exacting. Like if I said the word to you under those circumstances, you would probably run off and think that it's good to cause chaos to make order. So no chaos and no order. I'll delete that and I refrain. But I'll reveal the word later on and the other two words later on in a different installment where it will make sense, so it won't be out of context. So if you definitively learn it, it's like your response to it initially will be the correct response in the designation of what it was supposed to arrive at a conclusion from. So your initial conscious understanding of it will be your impulsive understanding of it. Preferably, right? So, back to the fucking point. Let's get back to the fucking point. Well, even when I found out that it was an animal psychological, it was so profane and so disgusting and so clouded by human beings for the same sake that the morsel of judgment would have been their very own that they chose to express in vain. Something as bad as never cry your enemy's tears, or so on and so forth. But it's so bad to know that, like, if you added up and the whole world mistreated you and treated you like shit, and you were always on the chopping block anyways to eventually succumb to some kind of death, it's like whether you were right or wrong, you're still going to lose the greater fight to the world. who might have fucked you over, even though it wasn't the world, but it still feels that way. So when those psychologicals rear their ugly head and you think it's like one of those profane troll fucking nerds that you love, because that's my homeboy. Nerds are my boys. I protect them first and second before I protect anything else, because it's like their critical opinion is going to matter when it's over. Or matter after the few moments of things that I have to do. So it's like, and it's just sad, because even as a primal person, and I put this here for us, because it's like, it may sound shitty, but like, who am I going to save first or second? And now, I've got to save the nerds, because whether I agree with them or not, if I save them, their critical evaluation of how crazy they actually are, and because sometimes it's like, I'll let them say 3 or 4 things, and by the time that they're done with that crazy ass shit, then we get down to the surface of like, and then you're going to switch sweet apps to the other computer apps that have like 4 or 5 programs in it, and then you're going to use that app to lay out what you got to lay out, and then you can have people comment in the forum. I had to sit through 3 or 4 comments that had to do with like, you know, mutating, mutilation, killing, slayering, zombieing, monsters, creatures mutating, things that are wrong with fate, why nerds bully the shit out of people, all the things that they did that were pinpoint worse than pressure points, and holding people up to a decree of what's so wrong with life that's even wronger because they have to be right about something that was so wrong that they made it wronger to understand. After sitting through that whole fucking thing, I have to then go back and clean up all of our aggressors, because I'm probably one of the only brutes left over that can get along with them and understands them. But at that point, and I'm still very nerdy, so at that point, we start talking about us in reality and what we both know. As soon as he's done venting, if that's not anger and his intellectual credence, up to a certain point. So I sat through all that. And then I get back to the real fucking point. After that, with all the malicious shit that I don't really want to or have to do, I still have to agree that even while I have to like do something maliciously fucking crazy, or to joust them into the corner, which I would never do to them, because their opinion matters more. I wouldn't need to affect or change them. Eventually, when you get to their real opinion and what I need to actually work on from taking orders from them, because they don't like giving orders. But when you get to their point where they're like saying something about what would be better, I still have to like get from all that, go there and fence them down like shitty sheep, and just keep driving them into order if I care. I only care because of nerd. Otherwise, you'll never hear from me, because like usually once he's done with all of his oblivion, it's like, Jesus Christ, that's how you finish that business. I hope they don't realize that fate is some evil mutilant junk, because by the end of it, like once it melts, I can't really do anything for it anyways, because I'm not the guy who fights melting. I'm not a melting guy. So no one really understands this kind of crap. But when it gets back to like, oh, you're not supposed to remember who you are, and you're supposed to be a passionate warrior beyond that, no. I mark some shit up on the wall to make sure that when I come back, I can figure out that I'm not a monster or some shit and shit. Like, you see how many things got to be broken before I can really fuck with them or give a shit or have their back. And then by the end of it, it's still a nerd. Man, I still love them. And when they get their opinion right and they finally back in order after all their vengeance, swaying and burning and burning off the ends and getting them back to the understandable place of what nerd really wanted is a lot easier, so I keep nerd. Now, if I throw away nerd and I go and I listen to everybody else's bullshit, I've been lied to the whole entire time, to the point where the discerning of what you really want is so not real or to the surface that there's nothing to fence them back about all of them accept this as bad luck until I create a better solution for us, or no one really understands that you can't create a better solution, so its essence is natural and real for them to go through such pain and suffering. What the fuck? So anyway, by the end of that, I get to a certain point where like the other people that I would put in order of their opinion to what I'd have to chronicleize to be as manipulative, as nice as I could be and have to be sometimes to the world to get it to Now, if I listen to the fucking big ass brute or the other evil motherfucker, it's like I'm just gonna be hacking at him all day for no fucking reason. And then nothing happens except for like the tyranny and the salvage and their fucking ego, and for what I don't know. So I don't listen to any of them either, and I just disappear. But when or I assume a different place and role in society, and know that they'll probably never be there for me or anyone else, which isn't my real unified problem or anything, which I don't owe them anything, and I don't owe them myself. So anyway, so back to a different, more important point. I'll talk about the social dynamics of it later. But the main part of the point was that the animal said something so grotesque that I thought at first it was humans, but then when I realized an animal said it, it understood so much pain and suffering far beyond a human being that when it was okay, it was a human being, because I was like, oh man, you know, blah, blah, you frustrated, mad with life. But when the other thing doesn't have the right to know, doesn't really have the facet of what is supposed to be the suffering between all of us, like their empathy and their overall comprehension goes only so high that you think that they're suffering less. It was astounding to find out the animals almost know more than us at times and are almost suffering intuitionally more than us and them. That's so crazy. It made me feel so sad. But I'll give an example of it later because it doesn't seem like star craving mad, but when you find that kind of thing out, it's just amazing to know that, like, no matter what, if it vented that way, there is no way out from it vented that way. It still has to go to slaughter. It still knows that neither one of those things really fucking matter, and still has to live with the world mattering more than it. And then to have something that matters so much be clouded and put down to a point where no one realized that that's actually reality. It's not that it's a reality for an animal. It's not as reality for a human being. You know what the real reality of that is that every once in a while you don't know where this shit comes from. And you're thinking, holy shit, wait, that's probably just somebody being evil. No. That thing said that to all of us because it knew that that was the right thing to say at the right time when it had a moment to say it. Because if the whole world is going to continue to make something worse than a blue fire numbing evil agent of nothing hell, then it had only one thing to say before it went out. And it said something so logical that it wasn't even as profane as its own thing for suffering, its own gamut, its own, like, gratitude for life and suffering. That shit crazy. I wish I could just rehash the moments, but it's just not healthy too, and it's not healthy for you to go back and realize that while everyone was arguing, the human being was like, it thought it had some cold, badass things to say, and then I realized, like, holy shit, every time you ever heard, like, something like, oh yeah, I slit your throat, blah, blah, all that bullshit, you start to realize, in those farms every day, they get their throats slit. Did you know what's weird about that? No one realized that all the human beings felt big and bad, you gonna, like, slit his throat. They were suffering so much that even when the human was almost conditioned in that moment from thing to say something animals would say to each other out of hatred, which they could barely comprehend human hatred because it seems below their threshold for what pain is. That, given the factor that the answer was, they all understood how much worse it was if the human didn't even understand that and knew to slit their throat. What the fuck? So I'm not trying to convince anybody to be vegan or anything, but just that example is so small that, like, you didn't even realize that wasn't a human quote. Then some of your greatest quotes in villain history, because it's not like I'm a villain, but it's, of course, I'm on the other side of things. So it's like, alcohol to us isn't rotten substance, but it is. So in one world, alcohol is purity. In the other world, it's a savage. It's a savage survival, is what alcohol is, or what's the word I'm looking for? It is survival's decay. You understand? It's like survival's decay. Put it this way, just, take urban decay for what it is, and realize that society gave up on itself from not having enough energy to replenish itself, and it saw all the visible pressure points while succumbing to death, is what decay would almost be. There's a lot of biblical or holy words that if you kind of add them all up, it's not like anyone's really talking about death or the inheritance of disease, which is just, giving up or becoming devoid. Well, not giving up, but becoming devoid to certain things in your tune, or into being in touch with reality and what's actually going on. So, iron and water and air and some dirt or dust make some kind of a moss, or some kind of, what's the word I was looking for? Because it's not mold. Probably mold too, but it was I forget. The stains on the drain pipe or whatever. It was stuff like that. All of these things start adding up, and you start getting back to, oh my God, these are all words for the beginning of those types of madness. And it becomes the fact that an iron enriched area, or a metal enriched area, a water enriched environment, I want to say the other word, but anyway, a grass enriched environment, or no, what is that would be, I want to almost blame pollen, but no. Anyways, all these other things become enriched in the environment, and the environment starts to become crippled, or die off for different reasons, like mustard or horseradish. All things that are new, well, not new, but different growths in reality that come into existence into an ecosystem that cause it to get out of sync, out of whack, that even within urban society, prominent society, or any of those things, some people do not notice what's going on, and that is what causes extra decay. So these decays have a responsibility of how we deal with them in life, and cleaning things up, like keeping things clean. So that is the first sign, and on to that, of how our association with other ecliptic gods comes into play within what we are determining and dealing with in society and reality. So even when I'm sitting there and I check all these different things, and I lap the air in between my tongue, or I smell the tips of my fingers for different reasons, or put my finger in the air after licking my finger and check the wind. All of these things that you've seen great people do throughout history. Every once in a while you do, or you already naturally know, so you don't have to as much anymore. But all of these different parallel things, realizing that it wasn't gods, it wasn't humans, and it wasn't anything spiritual that I'm known to be advanced about. It wasn't creatures. It wasn't L. Ron Hubbard's shadow. It wasn't any of these weird religious figments. But then you get back to some basic animals, which I guess could include creatures too, but not really, because that's a whole different thing. That's like a different discovery in life. You know how they say that they have the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, the Golden Age, all that. These are all different sub-eras in discovery and revolutions for humankind that no one really stipulated, because there is no chronicle timeline. There is, but not really in what their discovery was attributed enough at the time to actually be chronicalized as a discovery, or as a piece of growth, or a definitive dominion, home, definition, any of those things. So I say all that because it all falls into a reality of Zeus is known for lightning. Just joking. So that doesn't put him into slavery or anything. But, either way, it gets back into, you're coming out of the electric car, and it'll walk your bullshit off. But anyways, it gets back to the fucking real oath of it all. And it's still, it's still in the meaning of, if that's the case, and they all kind of weren't there, and it wasn't artificial, the animal said something so far beyond a human conception that it sounded only human enough to be as disgusting as what existence was. Could you imagine that? It's like being backhanded by the lower statute of life, lower life forms. Lower life forms. The guy who called them lower life forms got slapped in the face by a fucking beaver or some shit. You know, got hit in the shin by a fucking penguin. Got like fucking, got smashed in the fucking face by a bird and shit. Like, it's just, it happens to all of us and shit. And then by the end of it, it's just like to realize all of that unconsciously. You know, the vegans might be on to some shit. Or the raw fooders. I didn't mind raw food at all. It was fucking amazing. It was a pretty good diet for a while. I have to go back on it sooner or later. But either way, I get into these like hamburger dishes, and I love McDonald's and all that bullshit. So every once in a while I do. But you know, McDonald's has some stuff, but they're not exactly like a vegan hash crunch fest or anything. So it's not like you can just instantly go there and get nothing but like an apple crisp and that's it. They'd have to have like a one entree piece. What the fuck am I doing? Anyway, you know, fucking worry. Tell your man that it would tap his balls if he doesn't. Just keep tapping their balls like a microphone until they listen to we need a vegan tray, and they'll be like, where are you, sir? You in jail? Why would it be a tray? And shit, well, it'll be like a fucking jail tray. It sounds like a jail tray trying to be traded with them. But anyway, by the end of it, it's just like, to know something like that, and I'll have to try to I'll find a way to reorder that and then like re-administer it so that you can feel how creepy and weird it was. Because at the time I realized I was listening to a bunch of arguing, and I added up everything, and I knew it wasn't exactly God's. And I know that human beings can be crazy and petty and say some wild shit. But when I realized that we were all bewitched by an animal telling us how much worse it is to comprehend a human being, and saying something that a human being was so oblivious enough to say in an evil way to feel strong about something, I realized how low the disgrace of mankind was to provide them so much suffering. This shit crazy. And I still have to go back on my diet, but it helps because when you start adding up like all the folders, like if you, I'm not trying to mess with anybody, but if you add up how much psychological jargon all these people think they have the right to bring to the fucking table, and you sit there and you realize like 6, 7, or 8 or whatever the fuck, and you start adding them all up, and like some of them aren't on your side, some of them are on the good side, some of them are on the bad side, and you start to see the psychologicals bleed through on how much they all think that they're owed the world and shit. And then you sit there and you see the technical people who are like, you know, whatever, technically you know how to make alcohol, you know how to do all this raw food or shit. Like, we're not involved in that. And you can tell we're not because, like, we're not doing anything. It's like you went and switched arguments, and everybody else who cared kept putting up curtains and designing everything while you were still in the argument for us and them to feel traditional of, like, of course, we're not going to lose a bunch of amenities because we're in an argument with somebody who's wrong for the world. It just doesn't work that way. That includes me being the type of person that's stupid enough to be like, I'll numb it because they shouldn't be attacking you anyways in that place, and they wanted you to feel the pain. So when I numbed it, it's to make sure that there was no other pressure point that they could find. So, you know, whatever, the amenities of the argument. But that's for the world. Now, even if it wasn't for the world, and I know that all the other evil villains that are on my side and that I'm spiritually clean with, they all have deals too. So it's not just like, oh, we did that for a special reason or we just felt like it. That's somebody else. But then when you realize it's not even nerds, it's not even them, they just felt like it. Yeah, I just felt like it. Then you start adding it up and you start realizing they have no psychological. And then you get back and you find out it's animals. They just felt like it. They just felt like eating. Put it together, right? And you think like we all paying this big debt and doing all this fucking shit. Nobody knows why we're getting our asses kicked. And we're getting our asses kicked by every psychological, and it all makes someone sense. And you're just waiting for some of them to break off, go their own way, us go our own way. They're alcoholics. They know why alcohol is good. And then they go their own way because they know why it's bad. And we're like, whatever, and then whatever. But then to add up all of it and just start to realize the only evil motherfucker was left who was being denied an evil and fate was the motherfucking animals being bullied. And then you just start adding it up a different way, and you're like, man, maybe we should find a different answer to try to be good to them. Because even if it's not them anymore, it's their psychological. So you got to go in there and save them every once in a while and shit. I mean, 6 fucking nipples ain't going to help somebody. 8 nipples ain't going to help somebody. After a while, you got to save their psychological. It just doesn't make any shit sense. See, nobody really understands because, then by the end of it, that detail is like, the fuck much torture and suffering do you need? Leave us all the fuck alone. So then by the end of it, you realize the only thing left over for such cruelty is to reward the just. So just don't ever forget to look into that vegan shit. And that the sicko part is that even when you're thinking about growing new organs, you know why? Some people started to realize this is too disgusting. Why won't they let us have stem cell research, all these different things? And you start blaming religion for why it doesn't want it or why all these conditions are. It's not really religion. It's that it has a lot of good opinion in religion. But most of our opinion has to do with some other fucking things in life. So let's say this. You can't do that because it requires you to do research on human beings. Also, you can't grow new, you can and you can, and they do now. But all what we're saying is why it was such a big deal and why it still is such a big deal is because it's not like you were thinking what you were thinking to heal people and do all this stuff. All of us in the other classes were kind of like, yeah, but you were thinking about growing chicken McNuggets without torturing animals at the time. That's a little disgusting. So even if you try to grow chicken nuggets that from a plant, it's like okay because it's a plant. So then you get back to the original argument. That just seems disgusting. So it just seems disgusting. So we're done with that. Either way, we're done with that. That's how we skipped it. It's still kind of disgusting, but you have to go and try to grow some vegan chicken nuggets because it's just probably healthier and better. Now, why there's a difference in this? No one likes their stuff being taken. So of course, you grow some stuff, it's for storage, and then once it's broken down, you eat some of the rest of it, and it goes away. The problem is that in the argument about why that's a problem for plants, stealing their stuff and then leaving them alive to go back and repeat the process is fucking annoying to them, sad, and just kind of a sad fucking thing. They notice it does bother them. But I'll tell you one thing and two things that you'll never believe about this, and I'm just kind of helping you out, but I'm also telling you the truth. It feels so good to grow a plant. I'm not just messing with you. Read between the lines what I'm telling you. It feels so good to attain meditation. Meditation feels so good. You don't believe me, right? You'll never believe me. Okay, so we'll leave it at that. Now, you get the part where, they grow something like a tomato or something incredible or whatever the fuck. That being removed, yeah, that's terrible. But if you take the whole plant out and you throw it away and dispose of everything and then you put up a new plant, all of it's still a good process, maybe less complaints. Could grow some herbal chicken nuggets, whatever, if you can figure out the process of doing that. It's not good or healthy for them to grow human things, even though it's semi-possible, but it's not really a good thing. One, they're not good at it. Two, they don't have a human soul. Lastly, it's a little bit more complex than giving them a human soul. And it still feels like them being pseudo taken over or provided with a psychological that isn't right for them, which is some form of inappropriate. I want to say the word, but it's just too sexual to imply the other word. So anyways, whatever. Anyways, by the end of it, it's not a good thing to do, and it conflicts humanity's existence with other elements in life, things in life. So where they refuge or don't notice their psychological provides more torture and suffering between all of us trying to find harmony for the different types of beings in the universe and in the world. So that's why we don't do that, including the fact that if you put it this way, if you're into dog fighting there isn't that much of a problem, but you're with brutes and all these other people, and there isn't that much of a problem overall in the universe, because it's like, if we had to, for every time we had to break their finger or bend their finger back or put them in some kind of a judo lock, for every, like, outburst, outlandish thing that they wanted to say to affect us, everybody else, everybody else, or all the other things and routines that they have to deal with in life, it would be so weird as to accept the fact that what brute and existence of volatility, savagery, annihilation, I'm giving that a mercy word for us. But anyway, by the end of it, goes up to a certain surface level where it's beyond comprehension why they have brutality to all of each other or violence. Now, we get back to a conclusion that even when it's not them, the whole universe has seen that so much in so many spaces that it's no matter a big deal, but is the biggest deal. Now, we're closing the door on that. When you see the universe in a whole total existence, and you can kind of ignore that or get away from it or get to a certain civil point of where there's a constitution for all the chaos and damages, even on the other side where chaos doesn't rule the world, but there is an order to chaos, or there should be, or what we have found in it is another psychological that we won't use or get near, but, you know, whatever. It's just depressing to know that Sky War includes the innocent, the unjust, or the profiteering of insanity to the capacity of infinity. So, chaos will not be included for usual reasons. So they're just fucking insane. I don't really owe them much anyway. But when it gets back to the greater point of all that, since the universe has seen so many things, all of those things have a way of, like, seeming like they don't mean anything, and that there's something more important to say about all of that. Now, once they're out of the way, you can see clearly the other life forms. I want you to understand something. Even when you know there's something left over that seems near heaven and seems near earth and seems near sky, or seems near all these other, like, you know, pleasurable villages or something like that, in the mind of your real dominions and shit, your home of thoughts, your pagoda, your hexagama domicilals, all of those things, and all of those parallels, it still gives back to the birth of, in the other world where you think there is something near heaven and it's all supposed to be a ray of light. I have to tell you the truth about something. All of those things are at more war and are greater war than any of us in existence, including the fact that they don't rationally realize it, tell us, or cognitively only understand it to a point where it's normal, and are actually living their lives at the surface of paying something as simple as King of the Hill, but not even including a human body. So with that inbound, you would probably still want to go back to the Pitbull fighter or the fucking, you know, chicken fighter motherfucker and bet on the game. And they would want you to bet on the game just to add more existence to the bet. That's how ruthless life, the universe, and everything else in the world is. And they're not even counted as elemental. Now, with all of that being abided by and endued, even though it's not that insane, but it is pretty much that insane, you should definitively have an understanding of that before you go and try to stick your hand in an oven type of crap, or the opposite of an oven. Now, let's go back to the real point of all of this. With that being said, does anyone else understand that the mortality that's left over has a divine intuition towards the overall obligation of life, that they're consistently working radically outside of life to produce more good things, to the point where we don't even have a recognition of it because life never really earns those things? Those beings that I've been acquainted with by accident before, I come to realize it's either them or complete ruthlessness. Now, as a human being, it's not the jealousy that's implied, because, like, there's really nothing to be jealous about. It's kind of really sad. Like, it's their perception that is so much greater than ours that you could be jealous, but it's not a point to be ruthless about that, because you'll still end up with brutes and madness and all your stupid bullshit. But it's still like a higher ascension of life and comprehension doesn't actually lead to why they're still fucking only dogfighting and why they only care about dogfighting. So I'm not. But when it comes back to it, and the pain and suffering is all somewhere else, and it's not even any relation to any of these things, it's cruel and unusual to know that from all of the spheres in life, even like alien life forms that were built, and like their petty squabble was that none of us deserve life, but they both tried to honor life, and the other one ate the other one for trying to live at all for no reason, because it didn't care, because it was just like eating life because it thought life worked that way. And the other one was seen as like petty to squabble for wanting a life, seeming so greedy, other than that the fact that they all earned a life. So it still seems like fucking disgusting and cruel. But in the end, it's almost like if that's how life works, and that's how kind of life works, the actual secret fraction to what's left over in life will never be added up, because it's supposed to be that you are free, or that eventually that it goes a right way. So that's all. Not because they would ruin it, just because they would eat everything in sight, or something like that. So I don't know. That's just the weird giving of life. But then we get back to the real moral and overall point. Yes, all the cruelty in the world is a result of animals trying to backlash almost all themselves. Go back and listen. Go back and listen to all the worst things you've heard in life about life and death and cruelty and all those things. It is a word owned by animals. And they've been through so much on both sides in the triarch of life by balanced people, that when you see that they just want nothing more than to tell the world to kill itself or something, they're probably right, because they've been through so much shit that it's like, if you kill yourself, well, you might give us an extra answer to get out of this. They've been through a lot of shit. So when you go back and you review life, and you're seeing all the psychologicals, the philosophies, and it all means something, don't forget to help out those animals. Buy yourself a pet. Take good care of animals. If you can lessen the cruelty on them, if you can eat less of it, and find a different alternative source to eat anything, just find something else to do. Because trust me, it will lessen the blow. And you'll start to realize the less you have involved in that, the less cruelty you have to deal with. And you'll start to realize that you notice that because of your non-involvement in hurting them. And you'll see flake clear up a lot. So it's not just important to be vegan. It's also better for the well-being in life and all the different sides that you may or may not be on. But even when everyone kind of inherently knows this and knows animals more than that, or life more than that, really it's life, not really animals. Really it's life more than that. The way that you won't see this in an ignorant or an inept way will also have to do with the very next step of why I told you all this. Because why would you care? Or in the end, why would the villain care? What makes the villain so much stronger than you? What do you need to know from hypknox? Well, if it's not an illumination, or if it's not a delusion or dementia, if it's not a psychosis, and it's not an outright hallucination or an auditory hallucination, and all of these things are off of the list, and then you're dealing with some strong being who can just impression reality on life in some Zen form of way, or just has a way of doing those things, like dealing with someone who's just clean but doesn't have the same opinion as you, it's not like they're supposed to put their power over you. So the next lesson that has to do with that is, why are you a villain? Now, the world disagrees with you and you're not right about everything, but you're technically not hurting anything morally, or you know better, so you have the right, or you have the responsibility to take care of the foresight and do better for them than you could offer yourself, whether you were or were not those things, or perfect, or this or that. And perfect is a good word to not be estranged to. You should always be working at being better. If the word is perfect, then the word is perfect. Go for that. So then I leave us at this. The next step would be, okay, alcohol, duality, Taoism, and some few other things that have a representation of, whatever. Anyways, that have both good and bad gods, and what their meaning is to life, and why it was overshadowed by morality or some of the other justices that we see. I'm not saying that they're truly honorable, but there every once in a while you'll say something like have a backbone, or like, stand up for yourself. And these things are usually coming from either good people or bad people or whatever. Now, even when you have to know these things, because some of the other quotes that come from mankind are clearly coming from evil villains or people from a different place, which the word villain itself also means like, okay, you had to take care of a small village, so you probably hit hard enough for them to remember to stay away from that fucking village. Or the village had creatures and monsters for some reason, so that's another chapter. But let's get back to the more service moment that I'm trying to mediate to get you to at least a very understanding of like, how do you deal with and conquer a villain considering they are your friend? Now, that's something I've dealt with my whole life about hugging people's ugly and different stuff like that, because it's like, I know alcohol isn't poisonous, but eventually it is. Now, the mystery and the myth behind that, I'm not really in a problem with alcoholism or anything like that, but between the fact that you could get so drunk and have the constitution to do certain things, like survive different elements and different things in life, you become aware of that life is not an illusion. So why do some things appear? Why do some things disappear? Or why do some people have an effect on reality? And what is it that reality has a curtain to? So, wow, I wish I could use some anime examples to tell them why the profit of their real powers are actually a part of excellence and true achievement in life. But let's just say, let's start with alcohol, because most human beings have never had a understandable alteration or a standard alteration of consciousness without alcohol or some kind of stimulant or something. So the jurisdiction of where your pressure points would be from stimulation would have been someplace you would have accidentally been in, like, you know, drinking something like Alice in Wonderland. All of these things have stories for a reason, and the intuition that you gain from those stories on your adventure make you a greater, stronger person, or you learn that the key to Ganondorf wasn't that he was from the Amazon village. Of course, you'd have to have a fat nose, be green, and be ugly, and then eventually be some kind of a pimp, which leads you into some kind of a fight with him. I don't know. But either way, just remember, this is what gives way to the village being more inspiringly understandable than what you think is just some drunk brute. Or at least it shouldn't be a drunk brute until he's stopped by his own village. Either meaning or nothing. Now, we get back to a point where there aren't really that many pressure points in reality, because that would be called magic in some respects. But like I said, most of the magic that I know is kind of illegal. It's illegal to me and I don't use it. And the things that are left over about what those things were that are unidentified, these are things I want you to understand how to deal with, at least in a subconscious synapses. So when I make a next thing, it'll have something to do with the dimensions of alcohol, drug abuse, and all these other things, and what ADHD and all these other intuitive psychological diseases might be giving away to, saying to you in life, or your process of distinguishing reality into a solid facet in between the difference of your evolution and your course of desires and what you knew to be reality and fate. So, if you have nothing to do with the world, what is your connection with reality and perceiving it when it has those kind of mistakes, flaws, or things? You may have to find a different way of dealing with it. Not every woman is Medusa. The root of our trees and our bloodline is not something that should make you feel like holding still in paralysis. No, it doesn't make any sense. We're going back to living our lives and minding our business, but when it comes back to it, we'll start and begin from somewhere around there for the next comprehension or something. I wish I could help more. But yes, but the reason I said that last segment part was because it was a list of things that were not under the category of fucking with reality and a part of defensive things or something. But anyways, we're out of here. We're going back to living our lives. Maybe I should just recount it. It wasn't delusion. It wasn't dimension. It wasn't an illusion. It wasn't a facet of reality. It wasn't a warp. It wasn't a bend. It wasn't any of those things. So no one was trying to manipulate you. It just wasn't a hallucination. And reality gave way to something that had a different or more staple or different meaning that you never noticed before. And that would be at the charge of what your overall fortitude, growth, and constitution were at the time to excel to a higher evolution of conscionable understanding within reality, giving way to things you may not have noticed or noticed. Like that other kind of thing where, like, Why does the soda seem so big? Why do you seem so small? Is that a fact? Or is that your perception of it? Or has your perception been altered to a point where your emotion is so outside of you that you like how good the soda might taste, but you don't really know because it feels like a giant soda? So, do you like the soda? Then you like the soda and you want to try the soda. But the soda seems so big that I should be wary of it. So, the reason is are you looking at the soda in 3D? Or because you're so emotional while you're looking at the soda, you're looking at the soda in an emotional context. So your emotions aren't actually in your body, or are they in your body? Or your perception of your emotions is the proper way. They are in your body. Your perception is the proper way. Now, then you get back to the overall thing, like the fountain of life is not a giant bottle of soda. So it's not that anything has been discovered here. So then we go back to the revelizing point of what we were talking about previous. Next time I'm going to do this when I'm not so stricken from like haystacking and all that. But by the end of the fucking moral point, which I'm always gonna fucking smoke your voice, but anyways, back to the moral conceited point. This has nothing to do with like saving people's lives or disease or like healing or anything. Even though I should make a giant episode about that, because most of this journey was, or most of this was to teach you all how to heal in a common way, so that you can deal with some things on the refuge of getting a better life from what we're all supposed to be illuminated about, discovered, solidarious about, or grown, or living life, or revolutionary, or at the point of the discovery of our real epiphanies. You know, open-minded growth, out of bounds consciousness, you know, real growth. The tangibility of intuition, you know, real things is what we're going after. So, and you should always naturally be feeling that way anyway. But I hope I fulfill some of these fucking promises. But by the end of it, let's just say that when you're tripping and the tripping becomes bigger than you, the soda bottle's actually bigger than you. Now, you see it because you're seeing it in real life perception. But why the bottle looks bigger than you is because your emotions, or everything you feel in life, is that all of the things you feel are bigger than that. So you're seeing from a magnifying scope of how much bigger the soda looks because of how much you want the soda. So it looks bigger. Now, why does the hallway look longer? Because it looks like the soda is further away from you while you're running over to it or some shit. Or the dialogue that, like, or the amount of, like, the dialogue of your how much you want this soda, not literally the dialogue, but, like, the amount of how much you want this soda fills time and space up to a point where it becomes so delusionary to what the distance of the bottle is to you and that perception, that it just seems further away even in your hands, but also bigger. That happens. Now, from drugs, yes, but not really. And no, it doesn't really happen in a very super duper way where you only find it that much noticeable. Don't break reality, but yes, your emotions are yours, all those other things are yours. Why it from time to time looks like that and can be the reverse of agoraphobia is because you are afraid of the inflection of the world, that everything seems so much further than what it really is that your life wants to be out of life, or afraid of it in so many different ways that it appears further than what it is for your safety and comfort, but also scares you all that much more than being on a balancing beam in the middle of nowhere over a skyscraper and walking across. All of these things to be conquered by your self-intuition and things, which is probably a list of like virtues and soulless and fortunate things to create acts about, to become higher in awareness or to conquer parts of yourself. So anyways, the testament of it all being. But by the end of it, I think that will cover some of the beginning synopsis of the next articles. But we're going to start with alcohol and why it has nothing to do with all of our failures of perceiving reality, and why a lot of people have brainwashed themselves or deny this guy or that guy, or the fruit, the bad fruit, and deny us all the better intuition just to argue with it. It's like they're too busy arguing to see a way in or a way out of reality. Of course, reality in life isn't a play toy, so of course I agree with them, but then it still goes back to, like, you still to this day, and most people, whether they know it or not, brainwashed or not, or had a different goal in mind or not, you're still arguing with the same old people. Did you realize that? You just don't want a new world, a new perception, or new things. And it's not even like a human being is giving it to you anymore. It's like, okay, yes, of course there was a lot of like weird shit involved with it that no one will want to relive ever again. Like, being under the table while they're arguing and have to, suddenly hide under the table while you were drunk with them and listen to this weird ass argument where you could blackmail the other person. Of course not. You just skip all that bullshit and was like, man, I was having a fun time drinking until I had to, like, hide why we were all, like, fucking drunk and, like, this other god wanted to tell us a bunch of weird shit to the other god, and they were in an argument about enjoying life or how you perceive life, which isn't even my argument. It's just that if you refuse to see and you're arguing with a man, you damn near destroyed yourself, humankind, and everyone else, and lied to each other and deluded each other to a point where you just did not want to talk to the person, understand them, or see the argument. And this has nothing to do with hypknox. This is just one of them things where, like, it's that bad that it deleted your perception on seeing a higher ascension in reality and life than what alcohol is a poison. Alcohol is a poison no more than death is an allusion to a dimension, and a dimension would be an allusion to purgatory, which has no meaning, in purpose has no meaning. So the existence in the place or thing would have no meaning without the altered perception. So you're stuck in some other place with no perception. And some have chosen to argue with that logic, objects, or anything that they can in order to not see or understand the light or the severity of the whole action implied, so that they wouldn't have to deal with the fact that it might be the same person that they're arguing with. Understandable, but still kind of like, wow, what a weird argument for you to be living in fear of being tricked one last time by people who were thousands of years old, and still the divine fruit, and still the divine drink, and still a whole nother facet in reality that you have never accidentally merged on or grew from or something. So that adventure continued. So this adventure will be to be continued. But I just thought that was interesting to know that people would fight themselves for all that bullshit by themselves, brainwashed or not, going through something, but still most of that is to avoid that the god of alcohol will not be communing and talking to you anytime soon. Weird. Keep in mind they were all good people and they've relinquished their identity since then, so I'm not sure what you'd have to be afraid of as far as like alcohol, other than that being addictive and wanting to live life just as much as any other human being, and so on and so forth. But the warm feelings you get are as good as what you're supposed to grace us with while you are drunk. Your real self, life, some more, and some other shit. But by the end of it, like, that's what gives due to, like, all the things that you learn from their graciousness and randomly, like, giving you facts and things on reality. I seem to give you way weird, devastating things, like if you hit that wall and everything turns black, you put your hand in my back pocket, bitch. Some of these things that I know are so old school and so wrong that I'm glad to give you the benefit of two different bloodlines, a few different other bloodlines, some things that unconsciously exist, and a bunch of other stuff that saves us time and bullshit, because it actually cleans up the world. But eventually, because we're not criminals, because we're taking from their pocket as a bit, I'll explain to you that if you've ever been kicked out of reality or dealt with a different dimension that way, there are certain things that you can do, and some of the logic that you learned in jail is to help you get out or to get down that northern star or whatever it is on the Underground Railroad or whatever the fuck. So, alcohol, astrology, and what's it called? Stars. What do they all have to do with anything besides the information of fucking solidarity? But besides the fact of that, on this side of the episode, we'll be talking about the light bearers and what Earth does when light is busy, I suppose. Now, I'll tell you something like this because what you see in reality, whether you believe it or know it or not, is somewhat in falsehood, and you'll know that the rationality of comprehending light, you'll realize more and more why people will say that life is a simulation and this and that, because you seem to perceive that with your mind's eye or your actual eyes that you understand everything you need to know about reality and other such things. But it still goes back into, while light is busy reprogramming different facets of reality, Earth is busy just growing stuff, and people want to always get hysterical or crazy when they lose their sight or have to do with other different fucking things. But what Earthlings are doing, or well, not exactly Earthlings, but Earth types are building more resources, because we know when the lights come back on, there will be something and not nothing. So hopefully you work out your argument. But even while they're all destroying parts of reality in order to untangle it into something of what they were guilty of or not guilty of, if they have been too far past guilty or stuck in purgatory or different stuff like that, they have the consistency of arguing, not wanting to be with the person who had judged them or had ended up in this way of treachery or trickery, and they've had to own the world in treachery or trickery due to the other person trying to make sure that the world can live with their credence. So all the mindless employees will always be constantly working, because then as reality doesn't just become into unfold and unfunction while they're adjudicating some other weird belief in life, you are asked to be able to clinically see in the dark. If you cannot, you're human or another type that just cannot see in the dark that well, we ask that you put your hand in your back pocket. I'm not going to teach you only the jail way. I just want you to know, no matter how busy it is, there is a way out from why even the architectural mechanics behind everything in fate and life, if you are allowed to somewhat live and they know that they're still working out a case but you just haven't been resolved yet, and you have to leave that fucking area or just go do something positive for the environment or group, you can go and do some different reality things. Since probably Earth is working and doesn't care, you probably know it has nothing to do with any of the other power, so you are asked to get out the normal way. I'm going to give you a quick rundown of that, so in case you ever end up in a light war, you'll be able to get out without bothering my other better half while he is adjudicating something, or I'm being an absolute solid, prude. So if anything, meet me back at Voodoo, as oddly enough, because I have a lot of maps from there. But anyway, unconditionally so, that's just what that would be, and not breaking the rules of reality. Oh, well, you were raising kids. That comes up a lot. I don't know why you would ever put those kids through that kind of wisdom, but don't. So anyways, I asked that you don't, because either way, they should be out upon their innocence or anything like that. But while burning the fucking time and growing stuff, you might as well know that, just do not disturb any one of them if you ever discover anything. Now, the question is why jail? Now, getting out into the Underground Railroad or following the Northern Star, or however you disseminate those dimensions and dominions, let's get to the distinguishation of why. Probably because I feel more comfortable in darkness than in light when it comes to shedding the theory of why disturb the light bearers or the other one while they're busy obviously adjudicating something. Otherwise no one would have noticed anything wrong, or you've smashed into the earth hard enough to see different reality parts that are figments of non-reality, and it just doesn't look like as wholesome as what you know light to be. So light will be refilling in those areas at some other point. Till then, you may have to wander home like you're not some kind of blind. Do not go in there, because it would be like water pressure almost evaporating you. So always treat it as such, because you can tell whether it's volatile or not. That would be all. I'm just covering those things because I might as well say it while we're in the factor that the few things that could or couldn't be bent, and why I didn't care to explain those things. Also having to do with alcohol and thirst. And thirst is a big one. Thirst does cause a lot of problems. Plus, there's also different folded platelets. Like, if it's not a chessboard, why is this conversation taped throughout the universe? You mean of those two gods arguing about alcohol and fruit? Well, let's put it this way. Their argument is infinite. The other places that you see that are invisible to reality and have weird look like it's crappy water light or something, Those are almost booths or openings in time and space where they can just go there and argue with each other while we drink and ignore the shit out of them. Yeah, Earth would do that. An Earthling type would do that. Because I get tired of hearing the argument too. And like, bro, I'm just growing shit and I can listen to argument. Sometimes I don't want to listen to argument, just keep growing a bunch of shit, or I need to focus on what I'm growing and not paying attention to them. So I just leave a vacuum there or whatever the fuck and let them go back to their fucking argument. If the vacuum is important, then it's probably not a black hole that just sucks every argument is or wants life in the world more than what existence is and puts that much pressure on everything at all. Or puts that much pressure on anything at all. Most of us are not inclined to doing that. So anyways, back to normal. And why alcohol is a very old child, but it's not an hallucinogen, but it is a very old child of things. So we'll have to say that alcohol is not a hallucinogen. Now, even with reality having certain falsities and stuff, how would that type of a child or element or anything lie to you about life accidentally? The answer is that the parents are fucking crazy. Or what they left around in their weird argument is so ignored that it becomes a non-sub reality, that when you're not in a reality that you're supposed to be at all, sometimes those things become visible, or you've fallen into a pillar so hard and so strong that it's seen throughout the whole universe, but your argument is only visible from those points and destinations in time, history, and fate, that where even though it's technically not supposed to exist, it's the hardest thing in the whole universe. So it's possible that it knows and is aware of those pillars, but it's still an invisible column of water or some non-light bearing water of leftover fate of a non-argument that's just out, or an argument or a debate that's just out there looming in life itself. So when you are in those crosshairs or in those cross nexuses of an argument, or those things that you do like alcohol or whatever, those things aren't always arguments with playthings of each other. So you know how that goes. But why would you tell me that? For you to be happier. Why would I need to be happier if I'm already happy? For you to be happier. For you to be happier. For you to be happier. And then by the end of it, it's just kind of like, you'll never understand those type of guys because you want to argue with them. And it's just like weird because it's like, you know, whatever. Anyway, so alcohol is not a hallucinogen because you're not supposed to make deals with things or whatever you think reality is. But anyways, by the end of it, your objective should be that you coerce something better for each other, and that includes why we don't make those offerings and deals, because they didn't want anything.